Okay, well, thanks so much.
It's so great to be here.
We
Such a beautiful day and beautiful faces in the crowd. Thanks for having me.
don't let Boston's weather fool you. I heard it's going to snow on Friday. Yeah, I want to kick this off by just hearing a bit about your background. We were just talking over lunch about your parents moving here from Russia, but I'd love to hear about your sort of early years and then kind of what led you into the business to begin with.
So, my family came to the States in 1979, and at the time I was 8 years old, and I couldn't speak English, but I realized that I loved music growing up in Russia. And music was the way I was able to communicate when we came here because since I couldn't speak the language, but I would listen to the radio and I would realize that I loved Blondie or I loved Joan Jett or I loved, don't judge me, Air Supply. I would look for kids in school who had stickers on their notebooks that had the names of the same artists that I loved. And so I would try to sit next to them and talk with them about that music because at the very least I could do that, even though I couldn't talk about some of the things that we were studying. I just wasn't yet advanced enough in my language capabilities, but music was for me always the great connector. And so not really knowing that I can pursue a career in music business, I thought I would just be a music fan forever, which would have been just fine. But then ultimately, when I was in law school, I discovered that not only could I love music, but I could also work in the music business, which was, a game-changing discovery for me.
So being the child of Russian immigrants, obviously going into law is not surprising, but how did you make that connection between law and music?
So I didn't start on the music track because, again, my family, immigrant family, they weren't really aware that there was a career to be had in music. No one actually thought about how the artist ultimately ended up on that stage. We just sort of thought that the artist materialized there. Mm-hmm. We didn't know about agents, lawyers, business managers, managers. And so when I got to law school, I was on a completely different track. I was on the international trade track. And through a set of circumstances, when I was just about ready to quit school because I just didn't like it, I was speaking to a friend of mine who was working at the RIAA, and he said, why are you struggling? Why are you so bummed out? You should just go into a career in music business. And I was like, what do you mean the music business? And so he told me that there's a whole universe of music business careers out there. He was working at the RIAA, ultimately shifted over to the MPAA and got me an interview at the RIAA. And then once that happened, it was like, the gates of heaven opened up and I entered nirvana because once I started at the Recording Industry Association of America, I knew that there was no going back for me into anything else.
You didn't quite follow the traditional path into an agency. You usually, if you read the stories, including my own, you sort of start the mailroom, then you become an assistant of an assistant, and then you sort of like rise through the ranks. But what led you into the agency business? And at least I know for myself, when I was a student, I personally had no idea that such a thing as an agent existed. So how did you find yourself into that side of the business?
So as you'll hear from a lot of my peers and contemporaries, it all looks idyllic once you get to a certain level of success, but there's so much blood, sweat, and tears that goes into getting to where a lot of the executives today are. For me, that took the form of opening my own practice, my own law practice, essentially, 6 or 8 months out of law school. I really don't recommend that anybody actually do this. It worked for me, but it was just such sheer struggle. And imagine this. I come back to New York from Washington after I finished law school. I took the bar, and I knew I wanted to live and work in New York City, but I had no job. I went on 3 job interviews. I got rejected at each one of them. I couldn't take any more rejection. So I was talking with my family at the time, and I was like, what do I do? And they said, well, just open your own firm. And I was like, well, I don't know anything. And they said, well, how hard can it be? You'll learn. So I thought, all right, interesting idea. Let's give this a try. So I leased some office space. I got, a shingle that had my name on it. And I started to see clients and actually had to advise people in their careers. And the majority of my clients at the time were musicians who were starting out. I read every single book that you can get your hands on about careers in the music business and advising artists in the music business. I developed the most vast network of attorney friends and colleagues that I can call onto when I struggled to give advice on a particular issue. But what winds up happening is if you utilize your knowledge, logic, and understand what your client wants, and you have aspiration, and you believe in that client more than you believe in anything else in the world, you're going to work hard to make sure that that artist gets anything and everything that that artist not only thinks themselves that they want, but that you foresee for them. And so ultimately it starts with the client and believing in that client, like you want to turn the world over for them. And so if I looked at an artist and that artist came to me and said, I've been presented with a production deal, what do I do next? I would explore what that production deal was for them, how many years it tied them up for. Was this a prospective, great partner for them, for their business? What else was there beside the production work that this client could have been doing? And together we would navigate that world. And throughout that process, I would not only use, my own legal skills that I was developing as I was going along in my practice, but I would also talk with my contemporaries and my colleagues at other firms to understand what they did for artists that were similarly situated, that I could also, partake some of their knowledge and utilize that for the development of my client. Ultimately, most of my clients stayed with me literally from day one until I ended up leaving the firm 16 years later, and I saw incredible careers develop right in front of my eyes, and was honored to be working with the musicians and the songwriters that I worked with. So,
was there?
That answers your question.
Of course, was I guess who was your first client, and then was there a particular client that made you feel okay? I can breathe now. This is a real thing that I have here.
So I started practicing in the heyday of hip hop in New York City. So this is 94, 95. We're talking like Biggie, Lil' Kim, Puff Daddy. I believe that was Puff Daddy at the time. It wasn't Diddy yet, and it wasn't Puffy.
Or P. Diddy.
Or P. Diddy. So it was, Bad Boy Records, Island Def Jam, all of these like mega iconic labels and artists were just coming up. And so some of my first clients were hip hop artists. And I remember my first client was a young guy that came to me. He was going by the name of Castor Troy, not to be confused with the other rapper, Pastor Troy. But he adopted this name from a motion picture called Face Off. And there was a character in that film called Castor Troy, and so he adopted that as his artist name. We will leave the trademark issues around that out of this conversation, but he came to me with a demo, and there was a song on that demo that blew me away. And what he did is he went ahead and he he sampled one of the most iconic melodies in music, in my opinion, the theme from Love Story. And he put his rap over that loop. And I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, this is a top 40 hit. This is a pop hit. This is an artist that can cross over from hip hop into Z100 in New York. And so I embraced the demo, and I was like, I'm going to help you get a record deal. And unfortunately for him and for me, that sample was unclearable. the rights holder to Love Story was Famous Music, which was a Paramount company at the time. And I remember I wrote them a letter, and I said, please enclose find the demo of my client, and we'd like to clear the rights to this material. And by the way, at the time, it would have been up to the record label to clear that sample, not myself or my artist client. But he, at the time, was also thinking about going the indie route, which was quite radical for that period in time. Artists really didn't go indie. They wanted a major label deal. But he was sort of ahead of his time, and he said, if I can't get a record deal, I'm going to put this music out myself. And so there I am trying to clear this sample for him, and I get this horrible rejection from Famous Music, and it's basically like they almost like took my letter and wrote in magic marker Sharpie on it, absolutely not, and sent it back to me,
Wow.
because it was like so insulting that I would even dare to, try to clear this massive piece of music material for a completely unknown artist. And so that was my first client. He and I wound up doing a lot more together, minus that song. But he did end up being one of the first artists that I worked with to pursue independent distribution. And we also wound up partnering up internationally with a number of different record labels and licensed his material that he had full ownership of to international territories for inclusion on compilation records and things like that. So that was my first client. But to answer your question about the client that I thought, wow, this is going to be a game changer and I can breathe a little bit. I could never feel like I could breathe because I'm always like an overachiever. But when dance music, ultimately wound up being called EDM here, unfortunately, complete misnomer. But when dance music was all the rage in Europe, and was completely unheard of in America, other than, we had some disco in the 80s, obviously, but like the real trance ambient, house music that was so prominent in Europe and was not really making a dent in the market here. When I would go to the international conferences and international festivals and I would hear it, I was like, well, I need to get involved with this because this is like really exciting for me. And I started working with some of the first labels in America that were working in dance music. And there was an artist that I started working with at the time. When I started working with her is because she needed some guidance negotiating a recording agreement with a label called Subliminal Records. So her name is Shawnee Taylor, and she is not only then, but continues to be one of the most extraordinary voices in house music, a real queen, real diva. And she's somebody that I worked with for about 12 years and just saw her go from, a new promising young artist to a global music and touring sensation. So that was really a proud time in my practice. And that was the beginning of me working with many, many other dance and electronic artists.
How did you make the leap from being a lawyer, running your own practice, to going into the agency world, and then running an agency for that matter?
Okay, so you know how they say life happens when you're busy making plans for life? So some of the greatest things that have happened to me in my professional career happened by happenstance and an operation of circumstances that I couldn't have possibly expected. Like, for example, in the case of going from being an artist representative into the live space, I'd had my practice for about 6 years and, was finally feeling like, all right, we're rolling. I have great clients. I'm getting new clients every day. I'm fully confident in how I represent my artists. And then it was like 2004, 2005, and Napster happened. And what that did was that it shrunk the artist deals. So artists that were able to get a $500,000 signing advance, for example, that would have included a recording budget and money to live on while they record their record and, before they started touring, that money dried up, and sometimes it dried up to, like 1/10 of what the advances used to be. And then I said to myself, how can I represent a band of like 4 or 5 musicians, get a $75,000 advance, because that was like the higher end of the spectrum all of a sudden, and be able to draw a fee from that? It just felt like inequitable for the band, And I was like, if I'm starting to feel bad to get paid for a service that I rendered, that's not really a good place for an artist representative to be. So at that time, I had already developed a massive network of friends and colleagues. And so I was having lunch with one of them, who was then president of the agency group, Steve Martin. And I said to him, Steve, I'm really concerned about what's going on. And he's like, he's in the live business. He's like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, the music business is dying. And he's like, the music business is not dying. The recording business may be shrinking, but the live business is super healthy and it's thriving. And I was like, what do you mean the live business is thriving? Tell me more about this live business. Because as an artist representative, as a lawyer, you're focused on recording agreements, on publishing deals, on licenses, but you're very rarely getting involved in your artist tour deals because the agency takes care of that. They issue the contracts, they negotiate the deals, and they make sure that the artist gets paid, right? So as a lawyer, unless you're representing Madonna or Bruce Springsteen or Guns N' Roses, you're generally not getting involved in the nitty-gritty of the contract. So the live side was sort of happening as I was focused on the recording side. And he said, yeah, live side is super healthy. We have 2,000 artists and they're touring all over the world, and it's a great business. So I was like, do you guys need a lawyer? And he said, well, we sort of outsource our stuff, but if you want to move into our space, you can like be a tenant in our space, and yeah, there's some work here and there. And so that's what happened. I wound up moving across the street. I was in an office on West 57th Street between Broadway and 8th. Their office was across the street. I moved there, and I became a lawyer for the agency group, which in the beginning, I think nobody really knew how to like utilize me. And then all of a sudden, I was just seeing every single contract that came through: college dates, private corporate bookings, tour sponsorship agreements, utilization of the artist's name, image, likeness while on the road. So everything that would come through. And so, but by the way, I still had my practice, and I was still representing the agency group at that time. And then I became general counsel there essentially in 2009. And then we had some management shifts, and our UK headquarters, the agency group was headquartered in London, and our founder, Neil Warnock, brought on a CEO for the global business who was not from the music industry. And so he came to New York and he sat with me and he was like, listen, I'm going to need somebody to help me navigate the waters here, especially in the US, because I'm so unfamiliar with the business. Will you essentially abandon your practice and come in as a CEO of our US operations? At that point, I knew the business really well.
Did you see that coming, by the way?
No, completely not. It just was like, but it made total sense when he brought it up to me, because it combined all of the skills that I had nurtured and worked on over the years, i.e., the law stuff. And then it also allowed me to be more strategic in my thinking and help with the business development, which is what I was so passionate about. And just, focus on how do we super serve our artists? How do we enhance the services that we deliver to our clients? And so it combined all of these things that I loved into one job, essentially. And so I went home, spoke with my husband about it. I'm like, do I abandon everything that I've just built over a course of 16 years? And he's like, like 6 months ago, you were sitting here telling me how you're sort of going through the same contracts over and over again and need a challenge, remember? And I was like, yeah. He goes, well, here's your challenge, And so I took a leap of faith, and I called my lawyer friends, and I was like, I have these amazing clients. Would you like to work with them? Of course, they were all like, yes, absolutely. So we found homes for every one of the artists that I was working with, and made sure that they were in good hands, and I took on the CEO role.
Were there any clients that you had that also happened to be the agency group artists?
I tried not to do that for conflict reasons, because I never wanted someone to say, well, if you use Natalia's law services, you'll inevitably get signed to the agency group, so I didn't want it to seem like I was a funnel into the company. So, if there ever was somebody that I worked with as a lawyer that signed to the agency group, I would move them onto different counsel.
And for the students who may not be familiar with the agency group, can you tell them some of the artists that you guys represented at the time?
Sure. So Agency Group was a global company. By the time I took on the position, there was 7 offices worldwide. London, a small office in Malmo, Sweden, that focused on East European and Scandinavian markets. Toronto, New York, Miami, Nashville, and Los Angeles. So a robust global footprint. And we represented artists like Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, A$AP Rocky, Danny Brown, Axl Rose before he reunited with Guns N' Roses. Who else did we have? Three Doors Down. I mean, I'm saying names of bands that were like super hot, when it was the heyday of the agency group. Creed was, a massive band for us as well. Paramore. And then we had legacy acts like the Monkees and Brian Wilson and David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, and we also had Dolly Parton. So a lot of the clients that we still have on our roster, we developed at the agency group.
So what brought about the merger with UTA?
It was an interesting time. So the business has really developed. The artist brand building business has developed tremendously over the last decade. Used to be a record company would put out the record was king, the agency was there to support the record, put a tour around the single release, album release, whatever it was that the artist and his or her management team were planning, or the band's management team. So the agency was sort of there as a support system to support the album.
And at the time, the agency just represented music artists.
Yeah, yeah. And slowly, but not so slowly, the business changed to where the artist was also the brand, and you had to be able to work with the artist to help develop that brand and make it into an entity aside from just the name of the artist. So how do you represent an artist and help them get license deals, branding deals, help them to explore their talents in film, in television, in digital, whatever it may be that the artist wants to explore. As the agency group, we were not able to do that because we were incredible tour booking agents, but we didn't have all of these other divisions. And as the artists started to get more and more popular and more developed, they decided that they wanted to explore other platforms, and they absolutely should. But we weren't able to help them explore those avenues. And so it became very clear to us that in order to scale and continue to develop our business and continue to develop our artists' businesses, we had to provide a suite of services that was essentially a 360-degree representation model, which meant that we'd have to get together with a much larger full-service agency. And that's basically what happened in 2005. The agency group was acquired by UTA. United Talent Agency at the time was looking for a music division solution to their 360 model because they had everything but a robust music division. The music division at UTA was quite small. And so they were looking for a bigger presence in music. We were looking for a bigger presence in full service representation, and the stars sort of aligned and it came together.
Who were clients of United Talent at the time on the film and TV side?
God, I mean, Seth Rogen, Angelina Jolie, Gwyneth Paltrow, Johnny Depp, Judd Apatow. I mean,
Wow.
Bryan Cranston. It just is massive.
Do any of them, I guess Johnny Depp does, but do any of them actively perform music? And did you end up handling any of their crossover acts, if you will?
That's a great question.
And what happens when somebody comes and says, gee, I want to go on the road and tour as a music artist, and you're like, okay.
That's a great question. So there are a few that we have clients under representation that made their names in areas that weren't music. So for example, Kevin Costner and Modern West is a client of ours out of our Nashville office. Kevin is an extraordinary musician. I mean, just dynamic, engaging, everything you want in a live act. But he also understands that what he's able to achieve on the film side doesn't necessarily translate into selling out arenas on the music side. And he loves this project, and he puts out records and he tours in support. And every time he goes out, there are more and more people in the audience, coming to see the show. So I'm really proud to see what's developed with his band. We also have Billy Bob Thornton and the Boxmasters. Also just super compelling. I mean, you watch these guys and they're like massive stars, and then they'll play a reasonably small venue and just enjoy themselves to no end. Obviously Johnny with the Hollywood Vampires. Jeff Bridges has a band as well that we represented for a while. The agent that represented that band is not at the company anymore, so I presume that Jeff's band went with him. I'm not quite sure, but also just really great, because when it's a passion project, it's passion, and it doesn't matter if these artists are playing a club with 15 people or a theater with 3,000. They're just super passionate about it. I love it.
So for a lot of the students who may or may not be fully familiar between the distinction of a manager and an agent, what's interesting is that if you're a manager, you could quite possibly go for most of your career just representing 1, 2, 3 artists. Many artists become synonymous with their managers over the years, but as an agent, you're really responsible. I mean, in your situation, for well over 100 acts. How do you, as an agent, give the level of personal attention, if you will, that an artist needs when, by default, being in the agenting business means that you actually have to have a lot of artists, otherwise you don't really have a business model there if you're only representing 1 or 2 artists.
Yeah. Okay.
And you may want to explain a bit of the financial logistics of being an agent, because I'm not sure if everybody necessarily gets it.
Sure. So the principal role of the agent, the basis of what the agent does is we procure employment for artists. So we essentially find artists jobs in the form of live performance engagements. So as a matter of simplicity, and it can get a little complicated as the artist grows, but for our purposes here, the agents are generally on a 10% commission with their clients. So if an agent sells a show for $1,000, the commission is 10%. And so to your question about how do you give personal attention, so we may have 100 agents at our company, but each agent is responsible for his or her own roster, meaning that agent is the one who brought the artist into the agency. And then we'll also build teams around those clients, pulling in other areas that may be applicable. Like I said before, digital, branding, licensing, film, television, whatever areas that the artist may have aspirations in. But it's the RA on the music side that brings the client into the music section, and the RAs generally don't represent more than like 20 or 30 acts, right? So that's the roster. And then not all 20 or 30 are active all at the same time. So you may have, 5 to 10 touring on a particular album cycle or in a given period. And you can give personal attention to, 5, 8, 10, even 12 artists at the same time. It's possible.
So
I've seen it happen.
You've seen it work. So is the agency, I assume, is organized by client rather than by territory? Because I've seen the model kind of work both ways, where the agency has a roster and then you have different agents representing the entire roster, but for a particular region, in your situation, the agent has the client and they represent them, I assume, worldwide.
It's a hybrid.
Okay.
Ours is a hybrid. We do have territorial booking where we have agents that are responsible for booking a particular territory, but we also have scenarios where our agents, the RA, will book directly throughout the world or pull in, agents from other offices to help book throughout the world. Yeah.
And UTA has a great reputation for nurturing and growing talent. Can you tell us a bit about sort of what makes UTA unique? And it's a pretty competitive world, especially in the agency model. So how have you guys been able to carve your own identity in a super competitive space? And also for an agency that's relatively new compared to CAA or William Morris or ICM, who've been around. I mean, William Morris, well over 100 years now. I think it was the prototypical agency.
Yeah, maybe 150 at this point. Yeah. A lot of years. Ultimately, it boils down to relationships. Ultimately, it boils down to the job that an agent does for a client, where that client believes in the agent, hence the manager believes in the agent. Hence, if the manager signs another artist, chances are that agent is going to get the first look because there's already some history there. So it starts with relationships and chemistry between the agent and the artist. But also, it's the ability to service the client in as many areas as that client wants to be serviced in and excelling in that representation. So historically, the agency group and now UTA, we've been an artist development agency, which means that our agents are amazing at identifying talent early on and developing that talent into theater, arena, and stadium sellout artists and brands. And so, and the more you do great work and the more you're able to develop, and obviously, there's a team, there's the lawyer and the manager and the artist and the label and the publicist and the publisher, all sort of working together to generate that tsunami, so to speak, and make sure that the artist is, there's no stone left unturned and the artist is constantly in the best of hands. But it's basically concerted artist development with the team.
Is the relationship primarily with the manager or with the artist or both? And I assume, of course, it varies from client to client. And I would imagine some of them are probably even self-managed.
A lot are self-managed, particularly in the very beginning or, towards the latter stages of one's career when, some artists just decide that they don't want to tour as much and they'll be okay with just a tour manager and, a lawyer and a CPA and a business manager so that they don't really need a hands-on manager day to day. But it's so different. It really is so different. I mean, we have plenty of artists that'll dial us up directly, and then plenty of artists that just don't want to be bothered and they'd rather talk through their manager or are so busy that they'd rather talk to through their manager.
I was an agent for 6 years of my life, and I had a love-hate relationship with the concept of a self-managed artist. I loved having direct proximity with the talent and developing a close personal relationship with them. But on the other hand, it was just so hard sometimes to break bad news or tell them, you made 10 grand over here, but this guy's offering 2, and trust me, you should take this gig because of blah, blah, blah. Do you find that that's the case?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's tough, but it's a good thing you bring that up here, because I do think that it starts with education and artists understanding the business, because some artists have extraordinary expectations, as artists should, because they're artists. But if they really think about the business and how things are set up, how a record royalty works, why touring is designed the way it's designed, why a publicist may be successful getting them a late night appearance and why that publicist is not successful getting them a late night appearance. If they know that, and if they understand how those things work, and again, I think some of it starts here and then goes on as the artist develops in his or her professional career. If the artist understands the business, it's a lot easier to navigate together with that artist, even if there's not a manager.
So I'm going to preempt a question that I'm sure the audience will ask, because I used to get it when I was an agent, and I was mostly on the jazz side. I booked people like Chick Corea, Pat Metheny, and actually a number of people who graduated from this school. But at which point does an artist need an agent? I used to get this question all the time, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure if I had a perfect answer. I mean, my answer was, well, trust me, when you're ready for an agent will actually come to you. But I'm curious to see what your answer is.
That's true. That is a good assessment. Our agents are out all the time. They're talking to labels and managers and publicists and publishers all the time. They're reading blogs and trades and catching up on news and who's breaking all the time. I can't pretend to be as well versed in what's happening in the developing artist space than some of our younger agents, because they are on the ground and they are exploring and they're digging and they're always looking. So I think that it's a connection. I think it's like, I see a band and I'm hearing a sound and I just know that I can be the person that elevates this artist to the next level. And it could be off of one record, it can be off of 5 albums. There's just no formula. It can be at any time, but there has to be that connection and there has to be that chemistry between the representative and the artist.
Do you personally represent any artist? And if not, again, for the audience, I'm curious, what does the CEO of an agency do? So I was CEO of the agency group. My title at UTA is Head of U.S. Music Operations. So I always joke around with clients when I'm in a pitch meeting, because when they ask me what I'm going to do for them, I always say, I'm going to keep you out of jail. because ultimately, I just have to, I ensure that our clients are serviced to the best level possible. And I make sure that we have all of the resources to service our artists, that we cover all of the areas that an artist may need when they go out on the road, or if they're exploring the areas that they want to explore outside of music. Do we have a tour marketing division that's going to adequately cover 900 artists as they tour in a given year? Do we have a licensing and branding division that has tentacles long enough and far-reaching enough to be able to service an artist with a $15,000 brand deal and a $5 million brand deal? So my job is to recruit talent, both agent and artists, and also to ensure that once they're recruited, that they have all of the resources that they need, both to represent talent and be talent that can be represented adequately at our company. So actually, one of my first experiences in dealing with the agency group when I was an agent, and I was a young guy.
Oh no, you didn't tell me about this.
I gotta tell you the story. So I booked a band called Groove Collective. And I thought they would make a great opening act for Jamiroquai. And anyway, long story short, I managed to convince, I think it was Neil at the time, that they should be the opening band. But he says, great, you got to pay me 10 grand a gig. And I'm like, shit, where am I going to go and get 10 grand? So, of course, at the time, this was when the record labels were, this is the mid-90s. This is, I think, 95, 96. So, of course, I went to the label. It was GRP at the time, a guy called Tommy LaPuma. So I said, I need 70 grand for these 7 gigs, and trust me, we'll make a difference. It was all over Europe. And lo and behold, they gave me 70 grand, which I promptly turned over to the agency group.
Just to be clear, that wasn't going to the agency. That was
going
to
to
the band.
Jamiroquai. My point here is that those days are kind of long gone because, for developing acts like this band Groove Collective, which probably many people in the audience don't even know, if you're a young artist today, good luck your label giving you 70 grand for tour support. So I'm wondering how much has the business changed on the agency side with all these changes that are happening? Because everybody, to your point, talks about the disruption of the recording side, but the agenting business is alive and kicking. And even fundamentally, I'm curious, has the role changed that much, between being an agent in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today?
No doubt. And, that's one of the reasons why full service representation was essential for us because, as I said before, it used to be that the agent was responsible for booking dates and support of a record that was coming out or came out. But now our artists and our managers are looking to us to help them develop their brand in ways that we were never really asked to do. So, for example, if we use your example in today's times, if a band that's supporting a headliner needs $70,000 and that band is a client of ours, what we'll wind up doing if the record label is unable to help support, then we'll survey the brands that we work with on the branding and licensing side to see if there's maybe a tour sponsorship or some brand activation that may be done around not only the tour but a relationship between the brand and the artist. Usually with a developing brand and a developing artist, they can find a way to enter into a longer term relationship where they cross market one another as they both develop. I mean, Pepsi is not coming up with $70,000 to sponsor a tour by a support band. So we'll do that, and also we will oftentimes managers will now come out of pocket and offer that financial support depending on the level of the manager. It's tough. It's really, really tough out there, but it's the healthiest the tour business has ever been. It's tough, but it's healthy nevertheless.
Do you see any of these new technologies that are coming about, whether it's virtual reality or artificial intelligence? I mean, there's obviously a lot of talk on the consumption of music, how those technologies are going to change the way that we experience music, but do you see them in any way playing a role on the live side of the business? And if so, is there a division or is there a group within an organization like UTA sort of actively looking at these technologies and how they may impact the future of the way that you guys are doing business with?
It's every day. I mean, we have a digital and technology division spread between New York and Los Angeles. It's really a new day in terms of talent discovery from platforms like Musical.ly, for example. I mean, we represent Jacob Sartorius, who became known and famous from his Musical.ly presence, and is now a traditional live touring artist, just like any other artist that would have been discovered from a record label deal or more traditional means. So, technology is extremely helpful to us in terms of also marketing shows, like Bands in Town, for example, has been an extraordinary partner for us in terms of pinpointing affinity fans and markets where our bands are playing and promoters needing additional support to market shows there. We did a strategic partnership with Pledge Music for A&R purposes.
Founded by Berkeley, actually 2 Berkeley graduates.
Benji's incredible,
Yeah.
I'm a huge supporter of everything that he does. And we thought, can we mine Pledge Music data or, Pledge Music success stories for A&R purposes, and then if someone's trending on that platform or is having great success on the Pledge platform, does that translate into touring success as well? So I love being creative, and there are numerous different ways that we're now using technology to not only discover talent but also help develop and market.
Switching a bit on the more personal side, and I think I told you that I crowdsourced these questions, but have you found that it's been tough for you as a woman in the business to rise through the ranks? Have you personally ever encountered a situation where you felt, they're treating me unfairly here because of my gender?
This is a really tough question to answer because I'd like to think, and maybe I'm just fooling myself, that I excel or move on or do well in my profession based on my skills and based on my experience and based on my work ethic. And then if I don't develop or if I don't get the promotion, it's because I haven't gotten to the level where I deserve the promotion. I'd like to think that, but in reality, things may be quite different. It was very easy for me to gauge myself when I had my own practice. So for like 16 years, the woman thing didn't really play into my professional advancement or not, because I had my own practice. Clients were going to come to me because I represented them well, or represented their friends well, and their friends told them, use this lawyer. So I sort of thought, if I'm getting clients, that means I'm doing good work, not because I'm a man or a woman. So for 16 years, I lived in this like ideal universe or idyllic universe that like doesn't matter my gender. In the corporate world, I sit atop a music division, and I'm proud of the work that I've done, and I believe that I am where I'm supposed to be. I feel blessed every single day. I never think, oh my God, I'm here because I'm a woman, or oh my God, I'm not there because I'm a woman. I don't think that way. So just from my personal perspective, I don't think I've not been given opportunities because of my gender. Everyone will have a different response to that question, but I feel like I'm in the place where I'm supposed to be because of what I've done to build up to this. And I just hope that my career is allowed to continue to advance in a corporation the way it's advanced to date.
So we're both immigrants.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, how many people from the audience are international or non-U.S. born? Okay, quite a few. So UTA famously canceled its Oscar party, and my understanding is that it gave the money away towards immigrant causes. What role do you personally feel being in power at this time, and especially in charge of an agency that has a roster of people that have amazing influence over popular culture, and I mean, we've even seen it with the Academy Awards, but do you think that corporations ought to play a role in the political landscape one way or another, or do you feel, no, let's just stay out of that?
Well, I can only speak for UTA on this, and my role within the company and who I am by birth. So obviously, I'm super proud to be an employee at a company that took a very strong stand in support of what they believe is right. And it starts with our CEO. He's he's incredible. He's a titan, a Hollywood major success story. His name is Jeremy Zimmer. If you all have not heard his name before, do some research on him. He's a superstar. And he takes very strong positions in support of his very strong beliefs. And I wholeheartedly support it. Just so happens that I agree with him. Certainly as far as the rally is concerned, it was a tremendous success for us. It happened last Friday right outside of our offices on Civic Center Drive in LA. And basically, he decided that the immigration ban was not only a ban on a client of ours potentially coming in to the Oscars ceremony. Our client opted to boycott the Oscars ceremony. He was nominated for Best Foreign Film.
He's from Iran.
He's Iranian, yep. And so our CEO took a stand in support of our client, but overarchingly in support of artistic expression and artistic freedom. Not only freedom of artistic expression, but freedom of movement for artists who are expressing themselves all over the world. And so we not only donated $250,000 to the ACLU and other defense funds, but we also set up a CrowdRise campaign. And I believe as of Monday, it was up to $325,000, not including the money that we donated on behalf of UTA. So massive success for us. And I just am super proud to be a part of that initiative and a company that came up with that.
One last question, and then I want to make sure we open it up for the students. So certainly the industry's changed a lot since I went into it 20 plus years ago. I graduated from here in 94, so that's what, 23 years ago. It's both in some ways less clear of how you go about building a career, but on the other hand, a lot more fertile. There's a lot more ways, if you will, to build a career today. So I'm curious, what is your advice to students who come from multiple majors? Many just know Berkeley for the performance majors, but we have music business, music therapy, music education, sound design, music production, film scoring, and so forth. So what advice do you have about this class of students that is the future of the industry?
Did you say music therapy?
We have music therapy, yeah.
I love that. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Is anybody here from music therapy? This is rare. Actually, usually we have music therapy students, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that out on my own.
We have the largest music therapy major, I want to say, in the world.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I learn something new every day. Thank you for that. So I always say it's the best of times and the worst of times. It's the best of times because of the number of outlets there are to be heard and get your voice and your material out there. But it's the worst of times because of the amount of noise that there is, out there on the interwebs and elsewhere. However, I still believe that it starts with the song and it starts with material. And if you've got a great song, it's going to find its way to the mass populace. I discover music every day, and I listen to playlists on just about every streaming platform. And I don't discover just one song a day. I'll discover, 5 or 6 things that I really love by artists that I've never heard of before. And inevitably, I'll come to the office, and I'm just like, we need to sign all these acts, and the agents are like, okay, hold on, one at a time. But no, seriously, I think that the song is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's about the material and how the material connects with the public. So if you're writing great songs or co-writing great songs, putting great material out there, it'll get heard and it'll be noticed.
Thanks. Okay, I want to open it up to everybody in the audience. Is there a mic, by the way? Okay, cool. So raise your hand and tell us both your name, where you're from, and your major. We're waiting for a microphone. Who has a microphone?
My name is this on?
Somebody will turn it on.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna blabber some nonsense in here until I hear my voice.
Here, you can have mine.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm Jonathan Richer. I'm from New York City, and I'm a performance and contemporary writing and production dual major. It's a long one, wow. And I was curious what role, if any, performers and music directors or sort of behind the scenes people have in what you guys do, and like, you know, your artists, particularly in the touring world, but maybe more broadly what that has to do with your agency and people that want to go into that, how that relationship might foster.
There is a section of the company that represents, I mean, in Hollywood, they're called below the line personnel for productions and for live performances. So we do have a division that specializes in that. You know, obviously it's essential for any artist that is creative and has creative production as part of their performance. We don't have a dedicated division on the music side for it because it's generally the domain of managers to identify those creatives and connect them with the artists for purposes of production tailoring. But, you know, those jobs are definitely out there. And if you're great, again, you know, you'll connect and you'll be discovered. And I'd love to see some of the stuff that you're working on. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sayak. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I'm a songwriting major. My question is based around types of things that you hear pretty much every day. I've noticed I'm part of an independent rock band, and we're kind of going the indie artist route. And within that, I've noticed that there's a lot of types of indie artists that kind of sound the same. Are there any archetypes of bands or artists or anything or songs that you're sick of hearing about?
No, never.
If something's good, it's good.
If it's good, it's good.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Hi, I'm Bruno from Brazil. And my question, I'm a songwriting and music business major. My question is, like, when you hear an artist, what makes you think, like, I want to sign this artist? Is it someone that you hear and you think, well, a lot of people may actually like this music, or is it something that you think, I love this music, so I want people to hear it?
For the most part, it's the second, it's the latter. It goes for record label executives and A&R people, it goes for agents, it goes for music publishers, because there are particular sections of each of those companies that are devoted to talent discovery. In our case, with the agents, it's, you know, every one of the agents is a talent scout, essentially. When they hear something and they love it and they connect to it, they're gonna try everything they can to bring it in and represent it and help develop it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question back there. Can you pass the microphone?
Hi, I'm Miles. I'm actually local. I'm from Boston. And I don't go here. I went to Stanford, and I did computer science.
We'll allow the occasional Stanford person to show
I'm
up.
an interloper. I'm sneaking in. And I'm trying to go into the music industry. And could you tear apart some of the trade-offs between being an agent and more of a band manager, someone who's more hands-on in terms of the lifestyle and what that actually means on a day-to-day basis of your career?
Sure. So a manager is the end-all be-all for the artist. They are the advisor, the guide, the counselor, not the legal counselor, but they advise and guide and counsel artists in their career choices. So a manager is usually the first one to believe in the artist and to try to help the artist develop. The manager is the one responsible for connecting the artist to other representatives. The manager may be the one to shop the artist to record companies. The manager may be the one to shop the artist to publishing companies for publishing deals, if that artist happens to also be a songwriter. The manager is responsible for creating initial brand relationships for the artist. It's basically 360-degree representation. Whereas the agent, sometimes also identified and procured by the manager on behalf of the artist, is strictly responsible for procuring hopefully paid engagements for the talent, for the musician, for the artist. And so the agent's lane initially can be quite narrow, but then the agent and the manager will often work together if the agent has the full service capabilities to help enhance the business and the brand of the artist. But it's really the manager that drives the artist's business from day one.
And in terms of the lifestyle question, I don't know if you have an easy answer for that.
You know, I mean, in the very beginning, everyone is struggling. You know, it's like you play a show, you get $100, and you know, if your manager's on a 15 or 20% commission, that's $20. But it's reality, right? I mean, that's what happens when you're first starting out, and then the band has $80 to split, and then how much did you pay for, Backline? Did you have to rent it? How much did you take out of pocket to set yourselves up for that gig? How much did it cost you in gas? Did you have to rent a van? It's all that. So it's not lavish, let's put it that way. Certainly not in the beginning. And then it could take years to develop, and that's normal. There's no such thing as an overnight success anymore, in my opinion. So if you're dedicated, you're going to struggle, but ultimately the struggle will yield rewards, provided the music is good.
Any other questions? Oh, we have one over there.
My name is Nate Flax. I'm from New York, and this is my first year out of Berkeley, but I was EPD in film scoring.
EPD as in?
Electronic production and design.
Okay, yes. Guess at Berkeley don't know our acronyms.
Right, I got to get the Stanford, was it? Or I'm also half of an independent electronic duo called Sleeping Lion. And one of the things that we hear a lot, especially when there are industry people who we wind up talking to, is development, that there are things. And I'm curious, because it's different for everybody. I know it's not super clear cut, but are there certain metrics from streams to live shows to followings on social media? Are there things like checklists that help you say, okay, this band is developed and this is something that we can take on and keep on running with?
We do pay attention to socials, verified socials, and there's not really a metric. For influencers, there is. So if a brand wants to work with an influencer, they're looking for, 500,000 followers or, friends or whatever the destination is that they're looking at. For us, there's not a standard metric. I mean, we've signed artists off of 3,000 YouTube views, and we've passed on artists with 300,000 YouTube views. So it really, again, it depends on the material and where we think we can take the artist next.
So it comes down to the material and to the song and everything.
No doubt.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And out of curiosity, on the other side, on the non-client side, but on the employee side, what do you guys normally look for any students who are interested in going on the business side? I know you have a pretty robust intern program at UTA. You called it UTA University, right? So I'm just curious to learn a bit more about that.
So we look for passionate, enthusiastic, assertive, ambitious people. And obviously on the music side, they have to be music lovers, because you can't put in the kind of hours that our agents, assistants, trainees, and executives put in if you're not passionate about music.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, you have one more question?
Hi.
Okay. I promise Natalia will be done because she has a 3 p.m.
Yeah, sure.
train. But no, there's always time for a question.
I'll be quick. My question is quick. I'm Thomas. I am from Paris in France. I'll be majoring in film scoring, and I have a question. How do you manage the time and the responsibility, the pressure related to your CEO position? Because I guess you've got a lot of pressure, a lot of time. It's an important job. How do you manage to...
Well, because it didn't happen right after I graduated school, I've had a lot of years to build up to the stress level that is my everyday of like having a little bit of a withdrawal without my phone here, you know. Like I know when I get back, it's going to be, people are going to have to probably have sent out a search party for me. But, you know, here's the thing. No BS. The hours are crazy. It's 24/7. It's 7 days a week. We're a global company, so I start work at 5:30 in the morning. Well, I start the coffee at 5:30 in the morning, and then I start work at 6 o'clock with our London office because it's already their afternoon. And LA doesn't shut down until it's 9 o'clock in New York. So that's the work day. And then there's all the stuff after that that I didn't get to do during the day. And so I spend the next 3 hours after 9 o'clock catching up on emails and trying to, you know, settle the things that I didn't settle during the day. And if I have a show or multiple shows to go to that evening, then I probably am staying up till about 3 in the morning trying to finish my work. So the hours are crazy. The stress is crazy, but I love music. I love artists and I love our business. So for me, it's a blessing to be doing what I do.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is like the love of the music, like the
Exactly. Yeah. For the love of music.
Well, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me today. This has been really, really great. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, we're really grateful. Thank you.